how to leverage your life for its greatest impact. And I think so oftentimes we are informed by an environment that makes us less rather than calls us to more. What happened when Paul said, I appeal to Caesar? In that moment, what Paul decided to do was to make the secular the sacred. It would have made more sense for Paul to spend his whole life in the synagogue, because he was a Jew, so he could always go to the synagogue and talk to the Jews about the Messiah. I mean, that's the best space. Everyone's sort of ready. They already believe in the scriptures, all the Bible that exists. They already believe in the story of the Messiah coming. They're waiting expectantly for someone to come. If it's not Jesus, it's someone. So they're almost there. So Paul could have spent his life in the synagogues talking to people about the Messiah, about Jesus, and even if they responded negatively, at least they were on the same page. He could open up the book of Isaiah. He could open up Deuteronomy. He could open up the Proverbs. He could open up Genesis and say, let's look at the scriptures together. And then there was a whole group of other people called God-fearers. They were people who wanted to be Jews, who were not Jews, but they were so open because they were searching for God. Paul could have just spent his whole life with the God-fearers, the people who were open to God and wish they could be Jews. They wish they could be in the synagogue. They wish they were allowed in the temple, but they were not. But Paul had to keep going to the other end of the spectrum. He had to keep finding the person who was furthest from believing. He had to go to places like Mars Hill, a hill named after the god of war. In the city of Athens, named after the goddess of sensuality. And in the middle of that, Paul was always pressing to the spaces where no one else would be heard but him. He did not look for the sacred spaces. He looked for the most secular spaces, and he transformed them into sacred environments by his presence. One of the things that just frustrates me about, and I'm just going to say this about Christianity in this modern world, is that we are so soft. We're just soft. We're so bold when we come together. When we do this thing called church, we're the bravest people in the world. We're singing all these awesome songs and making all these incredible declarations. Like, your faith is just so awesome when you're in here. But when you leave, it just dissipates. It just disappears. You go back to work and you look just like anyone else who wasn't here. And then it becomes so important that the church does it right because you're not doing it all. And one of the interesting dynamics in life is that God didn't bring you here so that you would have a place you could be spiritual, a place where you could have a sacred experience. God brought you here so that you could not have any experience except a sacred experience. One of the frustrations of having a Tesla is that when it dies, it dies. And the battery, it just drops and it lies. It says 89 miles and 32. Like, what happened to the other 50? Don't care. And then it redirects you to a charging station, and I lose time. The one thing I do like about a gas-powered vehicle is I can fill it with gas in a matter of minutes. When my Tesla runs out of battery, it costs me an hour or 2 hours. And that's at a supercharger. If I use my charger, it's 2 days. I cannot go far. I can get coffee, that's about it. And then on top of that, it will send me little notices. You need to reduce your battery because your battery memory is going to lose its ability to be charged. So what happens is that if you charge your battery and you don't drain it, it loses its memory. It doesn't know how much energy, how much power it actually can carry. And well, that's the explanation for most people I know that believe in God. They come to church, they come and they worship, they listen to the message, they are filled with inspiration and faith, and then they go and they don't do anything with it. And so they can't understand why their capacity for faith is so small. Because your internal soul battery doesn't know how much you're capable of because you never use what you receive. So we have to be careful. And I get this question all the time from people going, how come you don't use any language like other people who believe in God do? I said, first of all, I don't trust it. It feels disingenuous to me. It feels inauthentic. In fact, when someone has a spiritualized answer for every question, I don't trust that person anymore. Because when you go, well, how'd you make your marriage work? We just pray. They're lying to you. Marriages don't work because you pray. Praying helps. But communication helps a lot more. And sometimes we try to over-spiritualize things. Go, oh, he's the best shooting guard in the world, speaking of Steph, because he believes in Jesus. No, he believes in Jesus just like the guy who can't shoot. He took on certain disciplines and structures that allowed him to become the best in the world, and he believes in Jesus. And I think sometimes we try to make it magic. If you believe in Jesus, you're supposed to be awesome. You can believe in Jesus and be a disaster. And we have a lot of evidence of that. Even when you believe in Jesus, you have to decide to take everything that's, quote, secular and make it sacred. So you need to take stewardship over every area of your life. You need to become smarter. You can become smarter. You're not stuck. I do not believe that you're fixed in your intelligence. But your intelligence increases when you decide to learn. Your intelligence increases when you decide to be humble. Your intelligence increases when you become curious. You need to become smarter. Jesus doesn't compensate for being stupid. You need to become more disciplined. You can love God, and if you're undisciplined, you will never break through. But no one tells us that. We just like, no, just believe. And God will sprinkle fairy dust over your life. And you can still show up for work late. And you can still not hit the deadline. And you can still not get the project done, but because you believe in God, it's going to be okay. And then you wonder why people do not believe in God because of the way you're living your life. Paul, when he says, I appeal to Caesar, he's actually integrating that he believes in Jesus and that his world and Caesar are not separate. They're connected together, and you are most powerful when you appeal to Jesus and to Caesar in your life.